Ta-da!
He's finally here.
All apologies. Unfortunately, as you'll see and benefit from, I do speak at length, and so that pushes every interview down.
When they scheduled the interview, I said, "Can I have the last slot because I will want to ask more than one question to Kevin."
Smart, so smart, and you're going to be
Kev,
rewarded for that.
Kevin, I don't know if you remember this, but in 2016, you were showing yoga hosers at the Prince Charles. And as the film was showing, I came and followed you out into the foyer. And I said to you, I'm launching a podcast called Mark and Me. Can I ask you a few questions? And you said, after the showing, meet me back here. And I asked you a few questions. That now became the podcast that's here 8 years later with 9 million downloads. And you're back. And I've made it that you are guest now, episode 400.
That's fantastic. Oh my God, congratulations, man. Did you ever think you'd do 400 of anything in your life other than like
Nothing.
400 sessions of
No, I
jerking off?
didn't. No, no, never. And what's quite cool is since the journey with you, I've had Anthony Hopkins, Mads Mikkelsen, with the cast
Amateurs,
and people,
unknowns.
and it's all leading back up to you. But also with the Viewerskew universe, I've tried to get everyone. So I've had Brian, Jeff, Ethan, Marilyn, Jason, Scott, Joey, and you again.
Oh, that rocks. That rocks, man. Anybody who talks to Scott has my heart because,
I had him on
Scott,
for 3 hours, Kevin.
are you serious?
Yep.
When?
About 2 years ago, after he just put out The Grinch. So he went away for ages and then he came back and we talked all about the release of The Grinch. It was probably longer than that now. It might be 3 years. And he was amazing.
He's so great. I'm one of my favorite people on the planet and stuff. But I love, that's right. I forgot Mosier was out there like doing a world of press for The Grinch. And generally, you don't see a lot of animated
No,
movie press, so to speak, because they kind of talk about the movie itself, not the people that made it. But Scott's story with that movie, I always thought was so fascinating. And it stands to reason that I hadn't thought about. But yeah, I guess he would have went out and did a bunch of press and stuff.
but
How awesome. Like, isn't he great to talk to? He's one of my
incredible.
favorite.
And what was amazing is when I asked you to come on the podcast, I launched with you. So I was like, I need to just smash this out of the park straight away. I want to be like, here's Kevin Smith. And people are like, fucking hell, they took me seriously. So episode 2 was Corey Feldman. And then episode 6 was Anthony Hopkins. Because people were like, well, if you've had Anthony Hopkins and you've had Kevin Smith, then we'll take you seriously. And then it just carried on. So it's now
Fucking
my,
A,
it's
man.
now my, it's my full-time job now.
That fucking rocks, man. I love that. That is like me. I remember years ago when I was like first started podcasting, I've been doing it for a while. That was my thing. I was always like, hey man, everyone in the audience should go start a podcast. Like fucking, it feels great. And like everybody's got shit to talk about and blah, blah, blah. So you are literally the physical manifestation of the thing that I've been like pushing for almost 2 decades at this point, which is like, hey man, like go out and do your own show. It's fun to watch a person's show. It's more fun to make your own show. So that makes me so
Massively.
fucking happy. Well done.
And the milestones are great. So episode 100 was Ed Solomon, who obviously wrote Bill and Ted, meant a lot to me. Episode 200, I took a leaf out of your book and I got my dad on. I made it the most personal episode I ever could.
That's
Episode,
gonna make me fucking cry. What did you talk to your dad about?
he told me everything about the day I was born, the day my granddad died, the day that he met my mum, the day that
Lord.
he fell in love, and all the stuff we've never talked about and we've always kept from each other. Like we're always like this macho father and son and don't always want to like get deep. And on that podcast, he was just like, maybe this is the time. And he's 87 now, and he's had heart troubles, and he's had a lot of stuff. And he sat there and told me about the time he joined the army, and they stripped him naked and painted him and left him in a room, and all these like crazy stories that he's never told me. And then I shared them with the world, and everyone was like, you could have had anyone. You could have tried to get Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Kevin Back, anybody, but you showed your dad to the world, and that's the best gift I could ever give.
That's fucking beautiful. And I don't just say that as a nice thing to say to a person. Like that's
Yeah.
one of my biggest regrets in this life is that I never had my father on a podcast. We weren't podcasting when he was
No.
alive. It was about, he died 2002 and then 2007. So 5 years later is when I started doing smodcasts and stuff. So I never had that, but you damn Skippy, I had my mom on the show like many
Yeah.
times. And that is fucking fantastic, man. Because not only was it a gift for your 200th episode and for whoever listened to it, and truly a gift for your fucking dad,
Yeah.
but that's going to be a gift to you for the rest of your fucking life. Nobody records conversations. We record images, we take snapshots and
Exactly
selfies
this.
and
I tell
things.
this to so many people because I always say, like, people are like, why'd you do the podcast? I'm like, it's my diary for the world to see, and it's my little footsteps that I keep leaving in the world. And if I got Kevin Smith to launch, that's the start of my journey. Then if I get Corey Feldman, that was when I loved Goonies, Gremlins. It tells you about my 80s love for films. Then I got my dad, the person that made me. And then my favorite band of all time is a band called Biffy Clyro in the UK, and they don't do many podcasts. And he came on for episode 300, and people went crazy because they were like, I've got the t-shirt now. Everyone was like, Mark got his favorite band, like he did it.
Look at you. Think about how much inspiration that you provide for the audience. So not only are you entertaining them and informing them, but you're inspiring them as well with things like that. Having your dad on, having the band on that fucking means something to you, and letting the audience take that journey with you. And when that happens, they can see growth and they see possibility. Like, hey, man, that's a cool thing. Like, maybe I could do something like that. And even if they don't mimic what you're doing, you inspire them to think beyond the borders, the parameters of what they're doing. So, in that way, we're no different. You know what I'm saying? Like, we do a thing that other people eventually, some, not all, but some go, shit, I want to do that thing. That looks fucking fun. And you're doing it at an expert level if you're inspiring your audience, which I fucking guarantee you are. Like, look, you inspired me, and I'm part of the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was just sitting there going, like, oh my god, how great to fucking to double dose the personal. It's one thing to talk about everything that everyone can
Yeah,
relate to,
of course.
but to do so many episodes where you're like, you know what, I feel comfortable enough to like fucking share my heart. Or share who I am underneath the presentation version of me, that may, as you've seen, means everything to the audience, and it inspires, man. Well done.
You inspired me, and I don't want to sound like too cheesy, but you're the reason I wanted to start podcasting. I used to listen to all of the Smodcasts in the very early days. I bought all your DVDs and Blu-rays, and then every version, the steel books and everything, all your comics. And then when I took my dad for his 80th birthday to New York, we took a day out to New Jersey, and I took him to the Quick Stop and had a photo of him holding some milk by the fridge, and I put it in black and white and made it my Facebook like profile picture for like 2 or 3 years because I was like, let's do it. And then I took him to the stash, and it was amazing. He was walking around. He has no fucking idea why there was a big Tusk doll on the ceiling, but for me, I was like, I'm sharing my view askew world with the most important man alive.
Oh my god, that means everything. You're gonna make me fucking cry. That's beautiful. Well done,
So
Mark.
what I do basically, Kevin, with all guests that come on, it's very different than following you into a foyer of a cinema and asking you
Right.
questions. But for all the usual people that come on, and this goes to anyone of all different walks of life, I'm always intrigued that when you were growing up, that first film you watched as a kid that made you fall in love with cinema. I know you're a huge fan of Batman. I know you're a huge fan of going to the cinema as a kid. But what was that film that's just the one?
You see, because it always felt like it's just been omnipresent in terms of
Yeah,
like, oh, it's always been, some people talk about like the Lord, like Jesus, he's just always there in my life. Movies as faith, as religion, has always been there. But I'm trying to think. And Jaws, hands
yeah.
down, it's got to be Jaws, because I see Jaws at a drive-in with my parents and my brother and sister. My whole family goes, and my parents had already seen it. And this is how big it was. Like we didn't come from a world where like you saw a movie twice. That was too expensive. But this was such a cultural phenomenon, and my father loved it. That even though him and my mom had seen it, they were like, let's take the kids, and they took a fucking 5-year-old to see Jaws, which disabused me of the notion that I'll ever go in the ocean ever again and shit. But also captured my imagination. So I feel like Jaws begins a love affair with movies, but not the kind that makes me go, oh, I want to make films for a living. That's the birth of me as a movie fan
Yeah.
right then and there. It was such a transformative experience. I remember my parents not letting me watch only one thing. They like cover his eyes, they said. And it was when they look at Chrissy's remains.
Unbelievable, yeah.
That's the only thing they were like, don't look at that. Everything, I watched a shark eat a child,
So
you
Alex
know, and he
Kintner being
fucking
ripped apart is fine, but
yeah.
yeah,
Dead guy's head floats out like in a sunken boat and shit. My parents like, he can handle that. He can't handle human remains and shit. So not only, I mean, fuck, you want to talk about a movie that made an impact? It made me a movie lover. It's so much so that like long before the era of the VCR, the VHS, I would tape record Jaws off of TV when they played it for the first time on like network television. I had a tape recorder and recorded the whole movie so I could listen to it on tape later on and stuff. So not only did it affect me as a movie fan or turn me into a movie fan, probably, and also terrify me at the same time. It also became kind of the basis for how I would view the world. In an early part in my life, I viewed the world through the two prisms, Jaws and fucking Star Wars.
I
And
love this.
both of they wow, you could see it. I'm not even like it's ridiculous, but you could see it in how much they both show up in the work.
Yeah.
For years, people have been like, is George Lucas an inspiration or Steven Spielberg? And I've been like, no, I never saw their films and said, oh, I want to make movies like them because they were gifted.
Yeah.
But I make movies where people talk about those movies, and there's a reason for that. So not only did Jaws like shape me as a movie fan, it literally probably saved my life because it kept me out of the ocean for like fucking 49 years at this point, man.
Jaws
Because
is
now
my favorite film of all time, Kevin. It's like
Jaws,
it's there's nothing that gets close. So everyone's like, it changes sometimes, and people are like, what's your top five favorite film? Always Jaws, number one. Number two, Almost Famous, because of Cameron Crowe's dialogue and writing and everything
beautiful
about
movie.
that whole soundtrack. But Jaws is a perfect film. The casting, the script, the story. I've had Carl Gottlieb on the podcast talking about how he wrote it, and then I was lucky enough to get Alex Kintner on because most of the rest of the cast are dead. So I've
Yeah,
done
they're
quite
all
well to
dead.
get a couple.
I saw the very charming story recently, and I think I've heard it before, where the lady who played Mrs. Kintner,
Oh
years
yeah,
later,
the slap.
yeah, she's the lady who slaps Brody. She went to like a sandwich shop or a restaurant, and on the menu they had a sandwich called the Alex Kintner. And so she told the waiter or waitress, like, oh my God, I played Alex Kintner's mother in the movie Jaws. And the person was like, hold on. They brought the owner out. And the owner was the guy who
Yep,
played Alex
his
Kintner's
restaurant.
son, his restaurant. And I was like, what a fucking charming reuniting story. Yeah,
Unbelievable.
Jaws, man, was the movie for me that made me a movie lover, for sure. I probably, we like I said, we weren't a rich family, so it's like the going to a movie more than once was
Unheard of.
unheard of, and it had to be a very special religious experience. And I remember I was part of a like a readathon at school where it was I forget who sponsored it, but you had to read as many books as you can, and then there were prizes. And one of the prizes was they were having a re-release screening of Jaws. And so I went for that. I was like, oh my God, I could see Jaws again because it never played
Again?
on television or
Yeah.
anything. So I got to see Jaws like for a second time in 1979. But until then, it was like that viewing in the drive-in had to sustain me for years and did. And of course, Gottlieb's Jaws log I read like years later. That's a great
One of the
fucking
best movie books ever.
oh, hands down, absolutely.
So I wondered at what point that you knew you wanted to start trying to make films. Obviously, Clerks was your debut, but to turn around to both your mum and dad and say, I want to be a film director, is probably
Never.
some parents' fear. Like,
Yeah.
grow up, son, get a real job, or go and, if you would want to be like, Mum, Dad, I want to be like Kurt Cobain. There's
Yeah.
only one Kurt Cobain. Like, let's be serious. Were your parents like, Kevin, fuck it, go for it, or actually, please, this is a nightmare to hear these words from your mouth?
They were fuck it, go for it. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't like they were like, we believe in our son or he's talented. Like they didn't know what I was talking about. Like, it would be like me trying to explain TikTok to my mom today and stuff. It was just like well beyond there. Like my dad understood movies because he took me to them all the time. But here I was talking about making one, but it was not like a standard movie like we were used to seeing at our multiplex. It was more of an art house movie, an indie film like this guy Richard Linklater made with Slacker. You want to talk about a movie that changed my life. Fucking Slacker is definitely it. So that was the movie that like made me go like, ooh, maybe I could be a filmmaker. I always say that I viewed it with a mixture of awe and arrogance. Awe because I'd never seen anything like Slacker, but arrogance because after it was all done, I was like, if this counts as a movie, I think I can make a fucking movie too. So I nursed that quietly. That wasn't something
Yeah,
I would share with my parents because my parents would be like, you make a movie? Do you know how much they cost? They make those in Hollywood, shit like that. The normal thing that a parent would
of
like,
course.
try to tell a kid, like, hey, put yourself into something more real. So I see Slacker. It makes me want to be a filmmaker, and I keep that quiet for a while. I'll tell my friends, but I won't tell my parents. And then eventually I tell my parents because I'm going to go to film school because I applied to go to the
Yeah.
Vancouver Film School and I got accepted. So I had to finally cop to my parents and be like, I saw this movie Slacker and it made me want to be a filmmaker. And so I think I could do this. And my parents were always really cool because I never like really finished anything. And because I didn't cost them a lot of money, like my brother and sister went to college after high
Yeah.
school. So even though they got student loans and stuff, that still cost my parents some money. So when I was like, I don't want to go to college, they were like, great. You're going to
Yeah, we
save
got
a ton
we
of
got some
money on
more
this
money,
kid.
yeah.
Exactly. And then when I said to him like, hey, I'm going to go to this film school, and they were patient with me, but you could tell they were like, well, he'll probably quit this too. And I did. Like I didn't finish film school. I dropped out. So I'm sure in their heads they were like, par for the course. It's what I pretty much expected. But when I got out of film school, when I dropped out, one of the only reasons I could leave early is because I told myself, you go home, you take the half of the tuition that was going to be paid to the rest of, for the year to the Vancouver Film School, you put it into this fucking movie you're going to make. You have to make this movie. Otherwise, this is just one more thing that you fucking quit. And you respect film far more than that. Like, don't let this be something else you lazed out of. So, Clerks, honestly, other than high school, the only thing I ever fucking finished in my young life. And that made all the difference. And my parents were not like cheering me on, going, he's a brilliant boy. They were just like, like his brother and sister went to fucking college and,
Yeah.
and we helped them financially. I went to them and only my parents, the only time I ever asked them for any resources for Clerks was when I couldn't make something happen myself. So we had found a place that wouldn't accept credit cards. And I had a bunch of credit cards and stuff, even though I couldn't afford them. And that's how we could afford to make the movie. But the Spirit Corp, the people that gave us that we
Yeah.
rented the Niagara the Niagara sound recorder, the Arri SR2 that we shot the movie on, and the Steenbeck that we cut the movie on, they would only take cash. So I had to reach out to my parents because I was like, I need $3,000 cash, which in 1992 in
That's
our
a
world
lot. Yeah.
is tantamount to me being like, I need $100,000. But mercifully, their whole life savings totaled fucking what I needed. So my parents were like, he never asked us for college money. We'll give him this. He'll do this until it's out of his system, and then he'll become a waiter like his brother. So they backed my play, but not like going, we believe in you, Kevin. They were just like, all right, like this is
Go
his
do
thing.
it. Go do your
He'll
thing.
do it. And how sweet. And so when it was done and they saw it, like I remember my mom's first reaction was like, you spent $28,000 on that piece of garbage. And I was like, no, 27,575, mother.
Yeah.
Don't round up. But when the movie got picked up and people started saying, like, your son is what he says he is, my mom became like, she was always my biggest fan personally, but professionally speaking, oh, she became a huge Kevin Smith fan. Like, she never rewrote history. Not like I believed in him from the start, but she did support me, her and my dad. I just know for a fact that when they were supporting me, they were like, this is how we get to the next step. And the next
Yeah.
step is settling down and getting a real job. So I was glad they patronized me. They don't, I didn't need them to believe in me. That
No.
would come after I did a thing. And they did. Shit, man. Fucking after Clerks, my parents were like, fuck, like the one least likely, like go figure. He knew something we didn't. And because of that, like, suddenly I had a glow up in my parents' eyes. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately because my mom and I have a very wonderful relationship, and I think I give her everything.
Yeah.
Without her, I don't exist and shit. But what I tend to forget and really gloss over is that before Clerks, like I had, I went to a nut house 2 years ago and I found this out. Like I'm a very codependent personality and a codependent people pleaser, and that has everything to do with my mother. Like my mother made me that way, and not in a fucking
No,
intentional
it's
way.
just how it happens.
Is how it happened. So my mom was always threatened by change. And my mom, like her place in the world was like, I don't have a lot of power, but I do have control of my family. And so she had to watch like her daughter go away to college and lose her control there. Her second son, my brother Donald, went to college. She lost her control. Me, I flirted with college, but never left home until I was 23. So my mom, had me. I was hers. And, she could count on me to do things. She can yank the chain. Like I remember going like, hey, Brian and Walter, I'm going out to the movies with them. It's like 9 o'clock at night one night. We're going to go see something. And my mom, and, I'm fucking 21 years old at this point, but I'm living at home. And so my mom goes, well, if you go to the movie theater tonight with your friends, you're going to come home and find your comic books on the floor. And I was like, all right. I had to go out to my friends and be like, I'm not going to the movies. And they're like, yeah, right. Get in the car. And I was like, no, seriously. My mom said I can't go. I'm like, who gives a shit? You're 21. I was like, it don't work that way in my house. So my mom kept me on a pretty tight leash until Clerks. Clerks bought me freedom, and it was begrudgingly that my mom had to let me go. That was the
Yeah.
last one, right? Like fucking, I can control his life. And then suddenly she couldn't anymore and stuff. And it was a period of growing pains for her, man. And eventually she got to a good place with it. But I was thinking about this recently because my mom was sick and she was in the hospital recently, and I was talking to her while I was down there, and she said this very telling thing. Came out like in a moment of just I wouldn't say despair, but she was like, God
Yeah,
damn
of
it, I've been in the
course.
hospital for a month. And she said, like, this is how she said it. She goes, I hate losing the control. She's like, that's what it comes down to. And I was like, wow, how honest. What an honest appraisal. Is like, as she gets older, she is losing her ability to say how things go in her small fiefdom and stuff. She had that while we were kids. And with me, she had it till I was like 23. And then she had to deal with the fact that I was grown up and making movies and shit like that. But even now, my mom has the thing about like, oh, I got to let go. I have to let loose. I have to let go of power or control. And it wasn't like she was a politician or a power
No, of
monger
course
with
not.
that power.
No.
But for her tiny corner of the world, she could control it. And then one day she couldn't control it anymore because all her kids grew up and stuff. So I think about a lot lately that my mom became the person. I think I've always loved my mother, but she's become the person that I've known for 30 years only because of Clerks. And we have a completely different relationship because of that. That was, a lot of kids declare their independence early on and fight with their parents in high school. I didn't do that, and I never fought with my parents. But by the time I was 23 and I was like, I'm going to make this movie, they didn't understand, but they backed my play. And I do know for a fact that they were like, this, he won't finish this, like he never finishes anything. And then one day he'll calm down and be a waiter like his brother. So Clerks was a total surprise for them. And it was also a learning curve for them because that was where my mom had to learn to let go of me. Now, the fact that she let go of me and gave me to the world, that made the transition easier because she became somebody. She
Of
became
course.
Kevin Smith's mother. So she got some currency out of that as well. And fuck, if you think I love being Kevin Smith, meet my mother. She loves being Kevin Smith's mother, man. Like it made all the difference. So I think about like what a gift that movie was for me, not just like, hey, it gave me a career and shit, but it also gave me my adult relationship with my mother. Like I adore my mother and stuff, and I absolutely love her, but it's not a codependent relationship like it used to be when I was a kid. That being said, it was the model for every relationship that I'd have with a woman afterwards and stuff. So I'm completely enmeshed, deeply entrenched in a codependent relationship with my wife. So it's I dodged a bullet in as much as, hey, I got to grow up, but some of that stuff that I was raised in lingers, and it's not a bad thing. I'm like, I was raised in a weird way.
No,
It
it's
was just,
it's a
I was
beautiful thing,
raised
I
with
think.
fealty toward my parents. Like that
Yeah.
was the thing. Now, like with my kid, like I never treated her like I'm your father. I was fucking young. I didn't know anything and shit. So I, treated her more like my friend, and like years later when she moved out of the house, I got this like fear of God where I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like fucking our child rearing days are over. How did we do? And I asked her for like a grade. I was like, kiddo, was I a good dad? And she said, it was really amusing. She goes, I never thought of you as my dad as much as my fun older brother who had all the money. And I was like, you know what? I don't bump into that at all. That's the vibe I was going for, man. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know how to be a parent, but I did know how to be a friend. So I had a different relationship with my kid. And, I was also one of those people who was like, you could do anything you want to do in life, anything you dream, except fly without a jetpack. Other than that, go fucking nuts. But they didn't tell our generation that. My father and mother were never like, you could do anything you dream about and shit. They would be like, see that mountain? Never climb it. You'll fucking fall. And not because they hated me, because they were trying to protect me and shit like that. And also, they'd never seen it done. So by doing it, by making a movie and then somebody picking up that movie and people being like, hey, your son is a bona fide filmmaker, that was the first time they'd seen anything like that could fucking happen. So they could be excused for not understanding the dream from day one. But boy, they bought into it when the rest of the world did. And that was when I needed them to. It was never like, man, one day I'll show my fucking parents. They were sweet. They supported me, but they didn't necessarily think it was going to evolve into anything, or and that it did. They were never bitter about. They were like, oh my god, thank God. What
Proud,
else
yeah,
was
but
Kevin gonna
relieved.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But relieved, but also this low key, like, this is the only way I can describe it. From both my parents, but particularly from my mother, he's a lot smarter than we gave him credit for. And it's not smart. And I tell my parents that. I was like, I am not smart. I'm just clever. I know how to market one item, Kevin
Yeah.
Smith. I know how to sell Kevin Smith.
That's
And you
all,
all
but I'll do it
invented,
well. Yeah.
yes, it's a very thin lane, but it's my lane.
So I can't, obviously, in the time we're given, go through your whole career, but I do want to talk about the 4:30 movie. I've seen
Oh,
it
yeah.
3 times now, and
Why three?
I watched it once as soon as I got the screener because I was like, oh, it's a new Kevin Smith film, and I'm not in America, so I can't go and see it in the cinema. So I watched it
Yeah.
straight away. My wife, I've been married just over 2 years, and my wife has never seen
Congrats.
any of your films ever.
Ooh, this is a good one to enter
And I
into.
was like, I am not starting with Yoga Hoses. I'm not starting with Tusk. I'm going to go in with
All
the
right.
fact that she likes 80s films. Her favorite film ever is Ferris Bueller. So I'm thinking it's quite tonally the same.
Yeah.
I'm not going in with Tusk. And that was the second viewing. And then just before this weekend that came, I showed my best friend it, and I was like, "You need to sit and watch this with me because he's a huge fan of your work. He loves Dogma. He thinks it's one of the best scripts ever." And I was like,
Oh
"You
my
need to
God.
check this out because this is Kevin doing a John Hughes film with a Cameron Crowe vibe in his world and not worrying about any big Hollywood producers telling him what to do. He's doing what he wants." And he was like, "Let's watch it." And before 80 minutes flew by, the credits were up, and he was like, "Fuck, that went too quick." I was like, how fun was that?
It was number one. Thank you for engaging with it three times, and also for passing it on. The biggest aspect of whatever it is I do is that people share it with people they love, and then
Yeah,
those people start engaging with it as well. Yeah, man, this is the movie that in many ways, naturally, I was born to make, literally, because it's about fucking me and how I fell in love with movies. And it's warm and cuddly. It doesn't say anything new, it's not groundbreaking and shit, but it is a filmmaker who's been doing it for 30 years, so he has some comfort level of like, I think I can do this correctly. And it's essentially what I looked at it as in retrospect is like, oh, is you're taking another bite at the Mallrats apple. This
of
movie's
course.
closest to Mallrats of anything I've ever made. And because it's about young people, like Mallrats was my youngest, characters to date, in terms of like they're just fresh out of high school. These cats are still in high school. And so it winds up being this coming of age movie. And, I saw somebody say something that I thought was very clever. They were like, he's been making coming of age movies his whole career. The only difference is they're age appropriate in this movie. He's like, this is who should be coming of age. What he normally does is people in their 20s, 30s, even 50s
Yeah,
coming of age. And he's like, but this is age appropriate. This is where you should be coming of age. And so I like that. I thought that was like, I was like, oh, that's true. Good point. Yeah, this makes sense. I finally made a coming of age movie, the first one since Mallrats. But when I was making Mallrats, never thought of it as a coming of age movie. Like Mallrats, I thought of as like, oh, this is me doing John Hughes and John Landis. But what was John Hughes if not the king of coming of age movies for a long period of time? And those movies shaped my existence. Like that was the first time we felt seen, like
yeah,
as teenagers, movie fans. Like there've been teen movies forever, But I didn't look at like American Graffiti and see myself because I didn't drive up and down a fucking strip in the 50s and whatnot. But this movie, like I could, like I felt like, oh, that's something I can see like versions of myself. This represents my youth. It has identity factor to it. And that's kind of what like this flick has going for it. It's like, oh my God, it fucking he's trying to channel his youth.
It
And
even felt like elements of like Dazed and Confused. I felt that kind of vibe in it at times. I also felt like even like Superbad, it just had this like mix of a pot of all the favorite coming of age films, the comedies you've seen, the heartwarming films, and it just had like a mix of everything. So I was like, this is going to please a lot of people. There can't be anyone that's like, I fucking hate this film because like, what do you hate about this? Because it's just it's Kevin Smith's heart on his sleeve
I
on a
wish
big
I'd been
screen.
more I wish I'd been more cognizant going in. Like now what I realize is because I was scared of this movie for a long time, right? Because I made it when I got out of the nut house. So it was about as fragile as I was when I got out of the place. It's got no edge. First movie I made in a decade where I wasn't stoned while I was making it and shit. So I was like wide awake and crisp and like dialed in on every frame of the movie and stuff. And so like if I'd known, if I'd been conscious of this fact, like, hey, if you make a movie about people who love movies, guess what? Movie lovers might like it. I didn't think like that. Now I realize it. I'm like, shit, I really could have leaned into that, made this movie 10 minutes longer and shit. But I'm glad that I didn't. Like, I'm glad that it's kind of a happy accident where I'm like, oh, yeah, of course, people that like movies would like this movie because it celebrates the love of cinema. And, you know, it doesn't like, you don't have to see 9 other movies to make this movie make sense. And so I get it now, but it wasn't a part of the formula, which I'm glad because it was, and I probably would have fucked it up. So if it's a happy accident where it's like, oh, this is a very user friendly movie, like the thing that I was most scared about while I was making this flick was I was like, it's got no edge whatsoever. Because set in the 80s, you know, we didn't sit around and say motherfucker all the time. I stripped out all the cursing. So for me, I'm like, well, my strength is fucking cursing and dealing with adult subject matter and shit like that. So without that, what does this movie got? Like it ain't groundbreaking, doesn't say anything fucking new and shit. It's soft. And so, you know, I was always like kind of scared of the 4:30 movie for that reason. I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing anything new or saying anything new. It's just sweet. But you know what? Maybe that's enough. So we go make the fucking flick. And afterwards, like I got a cut done, you know, shit. But when we wrapped the movie, the cast and crew got to watch an 85% of the movie. I just didn't edit the last few scenes because we had just finished that day. So they got to see most of the flick. And so I was done early. And, you know, I submitted to the Sundance Film Festival because I was like, this January, the one that passed, it's going to be the 30th anniversary of me going up there with Clerks. And here I have a movie about people that love movies. There's no way that this movie ain't going to play here. And what a great way to start the fucking life of this movie. And then Sundance had different ideas. They're like, it's very sweet, but no, we're not going to put it in the festival. And that went right to the heart of my fears about the movie, where I was like, I knew it had no edge. This movie has no fucking value because I didn't do it the way I normally do things. And fuck, man, like, God damn it. And so I slowly, quietly started distancing myself from the movie. I had 8, 10 months before the movie was
Yeah.
going to come out. So I had to do other things, but I put it on the back burner and I didn't think about it anymore because I was like, well, Sundance don't like it, it means it sucks. And then the movie comes out. And I was saying today, because I've been doing press all day, been talking to a lot of people who like reviewed the movie. I stopped reading reviews a few years ago and shit. Not because I'm like fuck reviews, but just because I'm like I got to a place where I was like, I'm happy with the movie. That's good. But this movie I was so fucking nervous about and so insecure about that I did fucking read reviews on the movie. And I was so fucking delighted to see that the reason that I was afraid that people wouldn't connect to the movie, I was like, oh my God, it's so soft, it's got no edge. That's the exact reason why people can interact with the movie as seemingly well as they do, because it has no edge. It doesn't have a fucking agenda. It's not trying to move the bar or move the line or say something that hasn't been said before. What it's trying to do is evoke a moment in time. You know, while I was making the movie, This is the first time I realized what I do for a living. I was like, oh my God, you artificially recreate moments that impacted your head and heart in an effort to share it with the audience and be like, do you agree? Don't you feel this
Wow.
way?
When you put
And
it like that,
so
I'm like, whoa, yeah.
it's true. It's true. It reminds me of like, there's this little comic strip that I saw in Mad Magazine when I was a kid. And it was Sergio Aragon's guy that drew in that style. He was doing, it was a Jaws joke. And so the idea was they had a bunch of people underwater in scuba gear and masks and cameras and lights surrounding this very fake shark hung from lines that you could see the seams in it. Clearly, you could tell it's a fake shark, and they're shooting it and shooting a Jaws like movie. And then just on the outskirts of the frame, there are six real sharks watching, like just fascinated by the process. And while I was making the 430 movie, that strip came to mind because I was like, oh my God, this is what you do. Look at all the effort that's put into manufacturing a moment that happened to you. And now it's artifice. It's all artifice. And you're bringing in cameras and you're having people lie and pretend to be somebody they're not. And you're putting lights in a certain way and you're obfuscating reality in order to carry this illusion forward. Also, that you could communicate to the audience some moment that profoundly impacted your life. So, based on that, this was a movie that was more about feeling than anything else. And when Sundance was like, we're not going to program it, I went here instead of here. And where I went was like, oh my God, the movie must suck. And for whatever reason, they didn't want it. They didn't want it. That has nothing to do
No.
with the movie itself and how I feel about the movie. But I learned something new about myself, which I was disappointed to learn, but it's important to learn. I thought I was past all that shit. I thought I was honestly past the point where somebody could tell me how I feel about my art. And they didn't mean to do this. Sundance wasn't a dick about it.
No.
Sundance being like, oh, the guy who made Clerks wants to come back with the latest movie? No. What I read into that was like, I'm soft, I'm done, no more edge, no more need for you. Like, you don't even count as a fucking legacy anymore. Like, you're done. So I was delighted to read reviews and read people interacting with the movie in the way that it made it. Like, they're interacting with it on the heart level. Like, they don't give a shit that it's not edgy. They're like, that's the point. Like, I kind of like it because it's not, because it
I feel like
reminds me.
that's a bit of a relief and a bit of a difference. I go to the cinema, I see Dune 2, absolutely fucking brilliant. I see Mad Max, I see all this, but it's all got a point. It's all got an edge. It's all got a reason. To actually watch a film that can just be a celebration of film or your life or love and just heart. That's the films that I remember when I was a kid, like Uncle Buck. That didn't have an
Yeah.
edge. That didn't need to be having a huge political statement. It
But
was
it did have
just,
John Candy, who was a
well,
fucking treasure.
yeah,
So
he's a
if I had John
god.
Candy, oh my God, what I could do with John Candy. But yeah, it's true, man. You're right. Like, some flicks
It's a breath of
you
fresh
feel.
air.
Yeah, some flicks you feel and you carry with you and whatnot. And I know too. That's the really disappointing thing, was like, I thought I was beyond this shit of, like, being insecure about my art and whatnot. And yet I fell prey to it, even at age 54, 16 films in. You can know where the hole is and still fall into it. The key is how quickly you can get out of the hole, because you can never avoid the hole completely. You can try and you can pin yourself against the walls and stuff like that. But sometimes you'll just walk forward, forgetting the hole is there, and wind up in the same fucking hole you fell into a zillion times. What you get, though, with experience, having years behind you, is you learn how to get out of the hole as quickly as possible. You'll never be perfect enough to
This is
avoid it.
Florence, Kevin, who was always going to make a cameo on the fucking episode. And
Look at
however I
that,
try
man.
and keep Florence to be well behaved for an interview, if it's Neil Marshall or Neil Blomkamp, she has to make a cameo. So this is her moment.
That's perfect, man. Florence, welcome to the machine, my friend.
One question I was thinking today, I was thinking he's doing press all day and he's going to get asked what inspired him, why he made this film, what it was like making the film. But I was thinking, what question will he not be answered? And I don't know if you've been answered this, but I would love to know, will we ever get to see Sister Sugar Walls, the
Mm.
Health Nut, or Booties ever from you? Because remember when obviously we had Grindhouse and we had stuff like Machete as a joke trailer?
Yes.
That
There
actually
are
happened.
precedents. There
Yeah.
are precedents. So it's not unheard of. Look, if anybody was like, "Hey, man, I got a couple bucks. I'd like to see that Sister Sugar Walls movie,"
I want to
I'd be
see it.
happy.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'd be happy to make it. Like it was fun to make the trailer in and of itself. Time consuming because, like, when you're making a flick, generally it's like, "Hey, we're shooting scenes in the convenience store, so we're going to be there all day." When you're shooting a movie trailer, you have to include scenes, many different scenes. So you're wind up going to locations, multiple locations, more so than you would for just shooting a normal scene. So it becomes like kind of cost prohibitive. Like we had originally a Bucklick trailer in the movie,
Oh,
the movie
wow.
we're going to see. But budgetarily, like Liz and Jordan were like, we can't afford that because it's got like 14 location setups. And I'm like, oh my God,
Jesus.
right. So you kind of let that stuff kind of slide. But this two other trailers are very simple and not trailery enough. Like, they're whole sequences.
Yeah.
Like the health nut, it's one long shot
That's
of somebody
so
running with the camera.
the
And then
noise
the
that
other
could not
one,
be shown. Yeah.
yes, I love the
Oh,
Scandinavian thing.
so
Just
good.
like I remember being a kid and they would say shit like that, like banned in these countries, and then they would list one country by name as if to say like it's so fucking bad, even they won't fucking let it go and shit
Yeah.
like that. So I that trailer, the second one long shot, the third one, the booties, is also kind of one long sequence more than a trailer. But Sister Sugar Walls is a flat out trailer with multiple locations.
Yeah,
It
it's
tells a
amazing.
lot of the story. So I would, if somebody had a few bucks and they were like, you know what, I want to see that Hooker Nun movie. Oh, I would love to make
Yeah,
that.
I
That'd
hope
be
people are listening now and they like start like a Kickstarter, and before you know it, we've raised a
yes.
few million. And I'm
Oh my
like,
God. Yeah,
we did
we don't
it.
even need that much. I think we could probably pull that off for like $500,000 at max.
Well, if it happens, I want to be a producer, and then I can say, well, this fucking episode 400 made Sister Sugar Walls.
Done and done. Look at that,
Deal.
man. Fucking, he started my podcast. I started his movie. Payback.
And what's next for you, Kevin? Because I see, obviously, following your journey, there's rumors of a Morat 2. Then you see, oh, there's a potential there surely could be a Clerks 4 with the way it ended.
Right.
Dogma now is back in your hands, rightfully so. So I'm looking forward to a tour of that and being able to buy it on Blu-ray for not $200 and
Exactly. An
having it
affordable
right.
version of Dogma is coming your way in
And I
2025.
just feel like there's so many things that you could do, and I wondered if you can actually tell me any that are gonna be likely happening.
Movie wise, the two that are like kind of the closest live options right now would be potentially in March. We could start shooting Jay and Silent Bob's Store Wars,
Yeah,
which is about Jay and Bob running their dispensary, fighting with a competing dispensary that opens across the street. And then if it's not that, like I've been having deep discussions with Justin Long about Moose Jaws because he plays a character in Moose Jaws.
yeah,
And so that seems like it's becoming closer. It looks like it's fleshing out in a way. For years, I've been like, one day we'll make Moose Jaws. And for some reason, right now, the stars seem to be aligning and whatnot. So it's one of those two as a feature, I would imagine. And then let me see, what else is there? Um, I don't know. This year felt like we just got to the tail end of like Chronicon and
that was
the
insane.
James Silent Bob
Yeah,
Cruise like that. It was like a year for growing these businesses and trying new things and also like then bringing the 430 movie into it and stuff. But next year, like honestly, like this is crazy, but there's like a couple TV irons in the fire,
oh,
which would be
because I
kind of
read
dope.
maybe a Dogma TV series, and I was like, fucking hell, hook it to my veins now.
That's a distinct possibility because they're like the people that picked up Dogma are like, would you continue the story? And I was like, you can't stop me from continuing the
Yeah,
story. Like, oh my God, I would love to. So there's some like possibilities, and always trying to spin plates and whatnot. I for some reason, I think the one that like, if I could pick anything and make it concrete as the next movie, hands down, it would be Moose Jaws because I
yeah,
do feel like aside from talking about it for a decade and shit, and I do that. I have to talk about stuff way far out in order to make it a reality. But I've described that as like there's that old adage like only Nixon could go to China,
yeah,
only Kevin Smith can make Moose Jaws, and instead of like going, geez, what can I do to be relevant? Like, because that's always in the back of your head as a 54-year-old who's been in the business 30 years. It's like, how do I maintain relevancy or gain new relevancy? In all the ways I think about doing it, it's almost like Moose Jaws is sitting in the back of the room going, "What are you fucking nuts? Like this is the future.
Yes.
Like fucking Jaws with a moose instead of a shark." So I feel like maybe I should, like, for years I've been trying to make it happen, but not very actively and stuff. This should be the year that like we get down to brass tacks, because I do feel like after watching Cocaine Bear capture people's imaginations,
I was gonna say
title alone,
it's like the world ready. I think the world is ready now. When you look at like Terrifier being the most successful R-rated film, Damien Leone with the budgets he's got, it feels like the world is now ready to be like, bring on Moose Jaws. Like
I think
5 years
so.
ago, no. 10 years ago, no. Tusk, it surprised people, it shocked people. If Tusk was released now, I think it would be an absolute huge success. I think the world is now
I agree.
adapting to like, give me fucked up shit.
I agree, man. I agree. We were a little early on Tusk. Sometimes we were a little early on Mallrats as well years ago. But Tusk, I felt like, aged incredibly well. Where, a friend of mine works at Netflix, and he was the producer on the movie, David Greathouse. And he's like, "Oh my God, if we had just waited 4 years," he's
Yeah.
going, "We could have had a $25 million budget for this film." And I was like, "You know what, Dave? Like, all we needed was three. Like
Yeah.
it did the job, and it captured imaginations. Like, having more money wouldn't necessarily made it better, so to speak. But timing, oh, it would have been so much better to make that
But
movie
what
now.
I really love about it is everyone does 31 days of horror, don't they? And they try and watch a horror film, and it's really, really like successful in the UK. And I see everyone in Instagram doing it, and so many people because of the substance are now getting into body horror, and they're really like there's a big, huge, huge like love at the moment for it. And I'm seeing so many people saying, "Fuck me, I've just discovered this film called Tusk," and I'm like, "Where were
Oh
you? Where were
God,
you before this?"
I love that. And I'm never like, "Oh, you were late for the party." I'm always happy if they ever show up. And I'm the older I get, and I've been doing this 3 decades now, I know the value in a movie that's ignored when it comes out.
Yeah.
Like, that was Mallrats, and I remember in the moment, because that was the first time it ever happened. I was like, "Oh my God, nobody's ever going to see this movie." If they don't see it in the moment, that just means they got a lifetime to catch up to it. And so by the time we got to Tusk, and I was like, "Oh man," like, it flopped when it came out. I was like, "No, no, no, no. You know the
Yeah.
future of this movie. It will find its audience." So we're at this moment now where Tusk has just been slowly swimming along for like the last 10 years. It's the 10-year
Yeah.
anniversary of this year.
That's freaky.
And suddenly it seems to have found its lane, and people are discovering it and whatnot. And that makes me so happy. I honestly, I need them to find Tusk now
Yeah.
more than I did back then. So it's water finds its level. And, that's why no filmmaker should ever be discouraged when, if they make a flick and the world doesn't fucking give a shit in the moment, man. It's not
Hey,
always about the moment.
1982, Blade Runner and The Thing completely bombed.
I paid to
You
see,
know?
well, I didn't pay, my parents paid, but I saw Blade Runner in our movie theater at what's now Smog Castle
Yeah.
Cinema. And it was me, my mom, my dad, and my brother and my sister. And I convinced everyone to go, because I was like, "Oh my God, Han Solo's in this movie and shit." And that movie is a little too esoteric for my family at that point. Like,
I
fucking
can
my
imagine
brother
your
said,
parents being like, "I'm bored."
my mom, I remember my mom saying, like, "Kevin's never allowed to pick the movie again."
That's incredible. Kevin, what I do on this podcast, I'm always intrigued, and I know it's a difficult one because you have written books that are incredible. You've had success with films, with TV, with everything, but I have a lot of listeners, and a lot of them are trying to get into the industry, and it's a
Oh yeah.
fucking beast of an industry to get into. And you've explained today how it all happened for Clerks, and your parents helped you, and it became this reality. But that's not the story for everyone. And I wondered in, 30 years after that, and in the world we're in right now, what advice you give to people? Maybe it's never read a bad review, never listen to the trolls, but what advice do you give to people that are really trying to get a name for themselves in this business? Because it's tough, isn't it?
It is very tough. And I am 3 decades in, and let me tell you, kids, it gets no easier. In fact, it gets harder. In terms of, like, people start looking at you like, "Well, you're fucking 54. Like, shouldn't we invest in the youth? Because they're the
The
future." And they're
16-year-old on
right.
TikTok, yeah.
100%, man. Like, now, like, I started as the flavor of the month, right? Like, holy shit, this kid came out of nowhere. Outsider artist made his movie and whatnot. Now, there are others who are being discovered. I'm 30 years in, so it's like nobody. Yes, periodically people will be like, I found this movie Tusk, but generally speaking, ain't nobody going to discover
Yeah,
Kevin Smith anymore.
that's
That
fair.
he's had his fucking run and stuff like that. But keeping it going, that's that's what I've enjoyed. Like the idea that like somebody could have told me my career was over a long time ago. It didn't matter. I just found a way to keep doing the thing that I wanted to do. And that's because I modified my expectations. Like, there's a expectation of you make a movie and it's going to show in a movie theater and people are going to see it and talk about it and stuff. Over time, I've learned to modify that expectation, which is like, you're going to make a movie and that's it. And everything else, that's just window dressing because the movie itself is going to outlive you, is going to live forever. And it's going to have a life that you can't chart for it necessarily.
How crazy is
So
that to try and get your head around, to know that in 100 years when you're not here, that still lives on?
it's important.
Blows my
It's so
mind.
important. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, think about, like, I mean, fucking Dickens is still with us because he's
Yeah.
he's gone, but that story outlived the author of the story and stuff.
Let's hope this episode does as well. This is why Sister Sugar Walls happened. This is the one that people go back to.
We'll trace it back to this moment. My best advice for every creative out there, who's fucking every let's narrow it down to filmmakers. For every
Yeah, of
filmmaker
course.
who's a filmmaker who just hasn't made a film yet, as we say in the movie, your voice is your currency. This is my favorite thing in the world to say. And people are like, what does that mean? It's like, well, your voice, that's how you see the world, man. There's a prism through which, a very individualized prism through which we all see the world and then filter it back out to others. Our translation of it, that's your voice. And that's valuable as fuck. A lot of people, when they try to enter the business, will be like, well, I'm going to do a thing like somebody else did because that worked. And you could do that. Sometimes mimicking success will create success, but it's not guaranteed. And since you're not guaranteed, I always feel like it's best to die on the cross of individuality, right? Do the thing that only you can do, because that's it. Like fucking your voice being your currency, spend it in that way where people are like, oh, I
Yeah.
understand what this person's saying, and I like what they're saying. And a lot of people, worry about in terms of this is a business that has to be commercial. And of course, because it costs a lot of money to make a movie. And so naturally people want to make money. And then there's the sensational horse race aspect to the business of like what was in the top 10 and shit like that. But nobody can guarantee success. Even Kevin Feige, who's inarguably one of the most
Yeah.
successful producers on the planet, the night before Deadpool Wolverine opened, he clenched his asshole too. He was just like, I don't fucking know. Like anything could happen tomorrow and stuff. We fucking put as much in as we hoped would attract people, but maybe
Who
it's the
knows? Yeah.
never know at the end of the day.
Look at Joker
So
2. Look at Joker 2. You know what I
I
mean?
would have
Everyone's
bet, and
like,
that's the thing. It's like in retrospect, everyone's like, "Why'd they make this movie?" If I was at a studio, I would have greenlit that movie in a
yeah,
heartbeat. Like, oh my god, you got the guy back, the director back, and then you're adding Lady Gaga, and it's more of the same. People love the first one. Fucking here's a big
make
blank
10
check.
of them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, I always tell people like your voice is your currency. It's that individualized aspect of who you are that is valuable because your life perspective is different from everybody else's, man. And we're all in this together. And the only way we move forward is with communication, finding out how other people do things. Oh, that works for you. Maybe I'll incorporate that. Here's what works for me. So we trade information. What is filmmaking, if not communication and trading information, man? And so the information you have is insanely fucking valuable because it's individualized and not everyone has it. And that voice of yours, that's the power. That's the value. Your voice is your currency. So spend it. Spend that fucking voice on something that is so uniquely you that it wouldn't exist without you. You're not guaranteed success. This is not a formula
No.
for success. This is a formula for personal success. Don't think about the audience because you're not guaranteed the audience is ever going to show up. Just like I said, Kevin Feige ain't guaranteed the
Yeah.
audience will show up. But you can always guarantee, and you will always guarantee, that you can satisfy one member of that audience, and that's you. That's the storyteller. So you use that voice. Your voice is your currency. Spend it on something that is uniquely you, man. And that is the best chance that you have of connecting with somebody else by virtue of, I didn't know that. And why would I know that? Because you've never expressed yourself before. I tell people all the time, like, if you take a step toward art, art will attack you and start licking your face like a fucking yellow lab and shit, but it requires you to take the step toward it and bring something to it. Bring yourself. Like, I know, George Lucas didn't necessarily bring himself when he wrote Star Wars, and he seemed to do quite well and shit. But there is a lot of George Lucas in that movie.
Yeah.
Put so much of yourself in your art, whether it's a movie, whether it's a song, whether it's a book. Your experience, your story has insane fucking value. Don't discount it because it's like, nobody cares about me. Yeah, make them care about you by fucking spending that currency of yours, which is your voice, man. Your voice is your currency. Spend it like you're a billionaire. You'll never run out of it. And it's the most valuable thing that you could bring to the table as an artist. Your individual take on the world is what's going to fuel you. Do it, kids. Your
Think
voice
how I
is.
spent my currency. My podcast is called Mark and Me. That's the, you know what I mean? I've emptied my pockets into the fucking world.
And most importantly, you sing in your song with your name first.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you recognize I have something to bring to the table. And that's exactly what you share in common with me, with Quentin Tarantino, with fucking who's the guy that they make fun of? He makes Yui Bowl.
Oh
We
shit, yeah.
all,
Tommy
we
Wiseau.
all, yeah, we all have that fucking that passion, like that for to tell a story. Like,
Yeah.
hey man, sit down with me in front of the fire. Let me tell you a fucking story for a while. And because of that, because of the things we do, other people sit there and go, "Oh, I want to do that
Can I
too."
sit down with you? Yeah.
Fuck yeah, fuck. And then go off on their journeys. Like, look at you, 400 fucking episodes in. That's
And I
beautiful.
got you back. It feels like, honestly, I'm not just saying this. I had a list of names and I was like, if I can work it out, if I can make it happen. I've emailed Jordan so many times. I've tried so
Oh
many
my
different
god.
things to happen. I've thought maybe at this Comic Con in Liverpool when you were here, I was like,
Yeah.
when's the right time? And then magic happened, dude. I'm on 394 right now, and I was like, this is just gonna happen. If Kevin says yes, and you were ill last week, and I was like,
I
oh
was.
fuck. I was like, you
So that delayed it
cancelled.
by
I
an
was like,
episode.
but
It's
then
400.
it made me bring out 395, and I'm like, it's all meant to happen.
That's very, very cool, man. That means the world. Thank you.
I've got one final question for
Fire
you,
away.
and I do it to every guest that comes on, and it's quite nice. The final question is you get to choose the last piece of music that's played at the end of the podcast. So, what I do on Mark and Me to make it as original as I can. Every guest that comes on, it doesn't matter if it's Scott Mosier, if it's Jason Lee, if it's Quentin Tarantino, whoever comes on, they get to choose the last piece of music. So, as this is all edited and ready for the world to listen to, Mark and Me with Kevin Smith, episode 400, what's the song that you want played that means a lot to you personally from the heart?
Mhm. All right. Honestly, it's no anthem of mine or anything, but I've been fascinated with the song lately. It's been on replay in my world because one particular line. It ties in nicely with the pup. Let's end with Florence and the Machines. The dog days are over because it has one of the most powerful lines I've ever heard in a piece of art. Happiness hit her like a bullet in the back. And
Yeah,
fuck if that ain't what we're all hoping for in life, man. Like, fucking to get hit with happiness so fucking hard. It feels you feel the impact. It makes your body fucking jerk and stuff. So I love that sentiment, man. I think that's honestly what we should all be searching for in life. Happiness to hit us like a fucking bullet in the back, if not right in the fucking face. So let's end on that song.
and what's beautiful is no one's picked that before, so I've had people come on and pick the same song and a different reason. But I love it when someone brings something new to the table because I'm like, now I'm going to spend the next few weeks listening to Florence and the Machine and editing it into the episode, and I'll be like, actually, I forgot how good she is, and listen to more music, and before you know it, I'll be listening to that for the next 2 months.
It's good, man. It's an earworm. I mean, that's what good art does, right?
Yeah. Kevin, I can't express with words how this journey's been. It's been 8 years of podcasting. It's become my full-time job, and it's genuinely because of you. It is. That's the truth. I met you in the cinema. You gave me your time. If you hadn't, I probably would have gone, fuck it, I can't be bothered. But you said yes. And I remember you saying once that Wayne Gretzky said it wasn't always about the goals he scored, it was about the shots he took. And the day I
Yes.
met you, I thought, I'm going to take my shot. It didn't matter if it went in, but I took the shot and now I'm here seeing the goal go in, you know?
Look what you did, man. You're your own Gretzky, for heaven's sakes. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Honestly, that makes me so fucking happy. I love when anybody's like, this is what I do for a living now. Like,
Yeah.
because I too aggregated from fan of a thing to a person that does a thing. So I appreciate that journey and I know how meaningful that it is. But I will say for the record, you did it all. You saw somebody having fun. You were like, that seems like a good idea. And I'm glad you picked up the ball and ran with it because look how happy you are. Look at what
I
it's
am.
done for
It's
your
made my
life.
whole life. My wife supports me every day with it, and I have got a list of names and I tick them all off. And there's things I've never thought would ever happen. Alex Winter, one of my favorite actors ever from The Lost Boys, he's been on 3 times. You know, it's these little stories. I'm
It's
like,
become a regular.
it's
How fucking awesome
unbelievable.
is
It's
that?
unbelievable. So I sometimes think it's a dream or not reality, but then I think, well, I worked my ass off and now I get to reap the rewards. And having you back is just the perfect. All my fans I know are going to just be like, because I've not told anybody. Only my wife knows. Everyone's
Right.
going to be like, "Fuck yeah, this is the moment, the 360, the full circle."
Oh, that fucking rocks, man. It's magical to be involved with, man. Look, um, it's all about cultural relevancy. That's the only reason I have a job still. It's like you always want to be culturally relevant. So even if a small aspect of that cultural relevancy is like, hey man, you were on that dude's podcast, you were on Mark's podcast, and fucking like he started with you. So you being on the podcast, like that's really fucking cool and meaningful. That's glow that makes me shine a little bit, man. So I thank you for that.
And I thank you for everything you've given and done. And I hope that maybe I speak to you on episode 800 in another 8 years, or
Let's not
where,
wait that
you
long,
know.
man. Every 100 is fine by me. Shit, every 50. Shit, every 37. There you go.
Well, tell Jordan to fucking return her emails.
Done and done. I will.
Thank you, Kevin. I will tell everyone
Your
about this
pleasure.
film. I will literally make sure that everyone I know gets to now go and see it because it's on in Amazon in the UK and stuff, and we can stream it finally. It sucks we never got a cinema release, but I will make sure that when our paths cross again, if it's a Comic Con or a UK Dogma tour, whatever it is, I will come and see you, give you a big hug, and just say thank you again.
Oh my God, you fucking rock, Mark. Bet you the next place we see each other is Liverpool.
Okay, then. That
I'm
sounds
going.
good.
I fell in love with it when I went over there for the con, and I'm like, I keep telling everybody about it. I'm like,
It's
if
like
you
an
ever go to
hour's drive
Liverpool,
from my house as well.
it's fucking beautiful. But I have acted like I discovered Liverpool recently. I'm like, I found this place in England. It's beautiful. It's called Liverpool, and they're like, where the Beatles are from. I'm like,
You need to do
yes,
the
but
Beatles tour. It's incredible.
that's what people told me,
Yeah,
man.
even if you
Like,
don't
oh
like
my
the
God,
Beatles or you're
cool.
not a massive music fan, you will still love the fact that that's where John Lennon lived and this is the road that they took the photo and this is the place where Paul McCartney met his. It's just everything, dude. It's just historic. You feel it in the air, the creativity.
That's what I did. I mean, like, I'm not the world's biggest Beatles fan, but like nothing but respect and love for years and
Yeah,
years. And I know certainly know enough about them and whatnot to like get through a game show if I had to answer questions. But like being in the belly of the beast where magic happened, eons back, where fucking
yeah.
paths crossed and suddenly the culture shifted dramatically. You can feel it. Like, there's some places you go and you're just like, something magical and important happened here. And it still resonates years
Did you
later.
get to
So,
go to the Cavern Club?
no, but I
Right,
got,
I'm taking you
I had no
there.
time.
When you come
Done
here,
and
I'm taking
done.
you there.
Done and done. They gave me like a pin for the
Yeah,
Cavern Club. And my friend Malcolm asked me the same thing. He's like, did you go? And I was like, no, we had no time. He's like, that's the best fucking part.
dude. When you're here, that's the first thing we do. Okay.
Done and done. Love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for everything, and I will. I'll try and keep in contact with Jordan and make something else happen in the future.
Absolutely.
Tell her to
100%.
look out for my emails next time.
I will, man. I'm definitely, I'll clip this out and she'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, I understand.
Awesome, dude. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mark. Excellent job.
Enjoy your rest of the day. I'm sure you're exhausted from all the press. Go and enjoy some family time and just relax, my friend.
I will. I've spoken about Kevin Smith enough. Now I'll talk about something else
Now
for a
go and
while.
watch Kevin Smith films.
Exactly.
See you soon, Kevin. Take care of
I'll
yourself.
see you later.